your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us. Mixed verdicts were handed Thursday to Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara, Lich and Barber at their trial in Ottawa for the roles in the mass protests that took place in the country's capital for 3 weeks in early 2022. Both were found guilty of mischief, and Barber was convicted of counseling others to disobey a court order about honking truck horns. In finding the two guilty of mischief, Ontario Court Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh said the evidence shows that the two routinely encouraged people to join or remain at the protests despite knowing the adverse effect it was having on downtown residents and businesses. But both were found not guilty of all other charges, including intimidation, obstructing police, and counseling others for those offenses. Court will reconvene on April the 16th to set a sentencing date. Prime Minister Mark Carney said Thursday that Canada will hit back against U.S. President Donald Trump's 25% auto tariffs with matching levies on vehicles imported from the United States. All of that money, he said, will go directly to auto workers and companies in Canada affected by the trade war.
We received confirmation that the latest reciprocal tariffs will not be imposed on Canada. At the same time, President Trump confirmed that the tariffs announced last week against our auto industry will come in, and indeed have come into effect today. So while it's progress that further tariffs were not imposed on Canada yesterday, the President's actions will reverberate here in Canada and across the world. 3 different sets of U.S. tariffs remain in place and will continue to pose significant threats to Canadian workers and Canadian businesses.
Now, speaking in Montreal Friday morning, Carney promised to increase the CBC's funding by $150 million, saying it plays a vital role in Canadian storytelling, news, and information. During a campaign stop in Edmonton on Tuesday, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh vowed to crack down on, quote, so-called cash-for-care clinics that charge Canadians for basic services. He would also ban American firms from buying up Canadian healthcare assets.
We also heard recently from Mark Carney that he said he would not expand pharmacare. And we're not surprised by that. I don't think anyone should be surprised by that, because the Liberals would have never brought in pharmacare but for New Democrats fighting for it and forcing them to do it. And it shows you again that the Liberals are not committed to healthcare. They're not committed to pharmacare. They're not going to expand it. So we got Mark Carney, who's not going to stand up and defend our healthcare. We know that Pierre Poilievre is going to accelerate selling it off and privatizing it. So who's going to stand up for you and your family to ensure that healthcare is never on the negotiating table, that we defend our public universal healthcare? That's New Democrats.
Singh also pitched to voters that his party will close corporate tax loopholes that he says cost Canadians up to $39 billion. Should they form government, a Singh-led NDP says they will end tax agreements with countries used as tax havens. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre promised to enact 5 recommendations put forward by the country's energy sector. He spoke while campaigning in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador.
The energy companies themselves, the 14 biggest of them, wrote all of us a letter. Every national leader, Conservative, Liberal, NDP, Green Bloc, wrote us all a letter with 5 demands. They said, either you do these 5 things or we will not be able to grow and break our dependence on the Americans. They're very specific. 1, repeal the No New Pipelines law and the tanker ban so that we can ship our resources to non-American markets. 2nd, it now takes, after the lost Liberal decade, it now takes 17 years to get a mine approved, while other countries do it in mere months. We can protect our environment and our population, but do it quickly. That's why I have announced I am committed to the Build Canada demand to reduce wait times for permits to 6 months. Next, the cap. The Liberals have imposed an energy cap. This will prevent our industry from growing and even force it to shrink in size, because the policy is to reduce the output of the industry. I have said I oppose the energy cap. And then we have the carbon tax, the famous carbon tax. You know, up until about 2 months ago, The Liberals said that if we didn't have a carbon tax, the whole planet would be lit aflame. If you tax the industrial backbone of the country, you tax every single person who lives in a modern economy. That tax increase will drive jobs away.
Toronto area candidate Paul Chiang says he is no longer running for the Liberals in this federal election, but it's not because his leader kicked him out. There have been days of mounting pressure for Chiang to resign or for the Liberals to fire him over his comments that a political opponent could be turned over to Chinese officials in return for a bounty. Chiang made the comments in January about Conservative candidate for Don Valley North Joe Tay, who had a bounty placed on him by Hong Kong police last December. Chiang told a Chinese language newspaper 3 months ago that everyone at a conference could claim a bounty if Tay was brought to Toronto's Chinese consulate. Tay is among 6 overseas activists targeted by Hong Kong police, which in December announced a bounty of about $180,000 for information leading up to his arrest. But when pressed about this at a news conference on Monday, Liberal leader Mark Carney had this to say.
Mr. Chiang has apologized for his comments. It's a lapse of judgment. He's apologized for his comments. He's apologized directly to me. He's apologized directly to the individual. He has a long record of service. He's going to continue his candidacy.
Chiang dropped out of the race just before midnight Monday evening, just hours after the RCMP told the media it's looking into whether Chiang broke the law. Now, to give us his thoughts on Chiang dropping out of the election is our political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, who sat down with BCN's Jeanette Rocher. Take a look.
A complete failure of leadership by Mark Carney. This was his first real leadership test and utter incompetence. Back in January, Paul Chiang, who is currently, he's still the Liberal MP for Markham, Unionville. This is an area northeast of Toronto. Very large Asian population there. There's a place called the Pacific Mall. You go there and you're going to see more Chinese lettering than you will see English lettering at times. Trust me, fantastic, fascinating place, but a big Chinese population. And Paul Chiang is of Chinese descent. Born in Pakistan to Chinese parents, came to Canada as a kid, served 28 years as a municipal police officer in York Region, just north of Toronto. Great story. But he's talking about one of his competitors, not in the same riding, but a Toronto riding, Don Valley North, this guy named Joe Tay. Joe Tay is also an immigrant from China, Hong Kong specifically, and he's still active in speaking out for democracy in Hong Kong and in China broadly. Well, Chinese government doesn't like this. Authorities there put a bounty on his head of 1 million Hong Kong dollars, which amounts to just under 200,000, 185 to 200,000 Canadian dollars. And Paul Chiang is out at an event in January speaking to Chinese language media, and he tells them all, you could go and take Joe Tay to the Chinese consulate in Toronto and collect the bounty money of 1 million Hong Kong dollars. He basically encouraged people to kidnap his political rival and hand them over to an authoritarian regime that would definitely jail him, possibly kill him. And this broke. So, as I said, the comments were in Chinese in January. Most English-speaking Canadians didn't hear about them.
Right.
Come Friday, the Toronto Association for Democracy in China puts out a news release saying, look, there's still Chinese foreign interference going on. Here's what the guy said. Here's what it is translated into English. Here's why this is a problem. I mean, we can all just look at the comments and say, that's a problem. Advocating that people take your political rival and hand them over to an authoritarian dictatorship is absolutely abhorrent. It was sometime, Paul Chiang did not deny the comments. He put out an apology. He later apologized to Joe Tay. But Mark Carney didn't fire him. In fact, I was there on Monday morning in an industrial park north of Toronto where he defended him. There were 6 different questions put to Mark Carney about this during his news conference. And he defended Paul Chiang to the hilt, called him a man of integrity. To quote Princess Bride, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. There's nothing to do with integrity in encouraging your political opponent to be kidnapped and handed over to China. This was a major failure in terms of Carney's test of leadership. He hasn't had many big. This is his first big stepping on a rake moment, you might say. And, in terms of leadership, it just wasn't there. Chiang, by the way, did resign later,
Right.
but only after the RCMP announced that they were investigating, because he may have broken the law in counseling people to commit a kidnapping, which is a crime.
The Canadian Pharmacists Association is urging the federal government to remove all drug-related products from a list of potential retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. The association says there are currently 8 pharmaceutical tariff codes on the list, but it's not clear which specific medications or drug products they include. The Pharmacists Association also says if tariffs on drugs are levied by the U.S. or Canada, it doesn't expect any immediate medication shortages and the drug supply is stable. But it is concerned about potential long-term problems because Canada relies heavily on global supply chains of pharmaceutical ingredients and medications, including the U.S., China, and India. Alberta has reached a new deal with more than 30,000 nurses after months of bargaining. The United Nurses of Alberta say the deal will see the nurses get pay increases of about 20% by 2028. The union says the agreement also includes job security, protection, a provincial government overhaul of its healthcare system, along with staffing level assurances. President of United Nurses of Alberta, Heather Smith, told BCN that nurses are now feeling hopeful for wanting to work in Alberta.
We talked about the 3 R's during this round of negotiations: respect, retention, recruitment. And there's elements in this new deal that I feel touch on all of them. We saw such an overwhelming acceptance is that nurses could say, in this settlement, I see elements of respect, I see retention, I see recruitment, and I see hope.
An Alberta Health Services policy that was supposed to take effect on April 1st has been horribly misinterpreted, according to the provincial government. After media reports surfaced about planned changes to food policies in emergency departments meant taking away snacks for young cancer patients, things like popsicles, juice boxes, and cookies, the province has now put a pause on the policy. According to Premier Danielle Smith, the proposed policy was not meant to deprive patients of food.
All I could tell is that there was something lost in translation. What AHS, and this was a decision that was made back in September, their intention was to change food delivery so that they could reduce any potential spoilage and waste, which makes sense. We want to be efficient. We don't want food going to spoil or waste. But somehow that got implemented in a way that was not consistent with what the policy was. So when we heard these stories, Minister LaGrange immediately called over to AHS and said, what is going on? And the new CEO is putting a pause on the policy to find out why it was interpreted incorrectly. And if we can still find some ways to save, we want to make sure that we can save on food wastage. But the intention was never to deny patients sustenance while they're waiting for treatment or after treatment. So it was a misapplication and a misinterpretation of a policy direction that's since been paused.
Alberta's opposition NDP leader Naheed Nenshi stopped in Lethbridge Tuesday after touring southern Alberta for the day. In a meeting with reporters, Nenshi bashed Premier Smith for her trip to Ben Shapiro's Prager U event, claiming she's, quote, sucking up to extremists. He was also critical on her tariff response to not implement tariffs on energy to the United States.
She claims victory that she somehow, by taking 4 staffers to Florida for a 20-minute fireside chat, convinced Ben Shapiro to talk about tariffs. In fact, he's been talking about tariffs for months. He already thinks that tariffs are a bad idea because he thinks Canada should be annexed, because he thinks Canada is a silly country that should be the 51st state. This is who the Premier hangs out with. When you look at Doug Ford, he knows how to bare his teeth in a negotiation. He knew how to say, hey, we're going to cut off electricity to the U.S. He never did cut off electricity to the U.S., but he got a call from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick that day. And sure enough, the next day, the tariffs were delayed by a month. The Premier, on the other hand, says, instead of showing my teeth, I'm just going to roll over for you. And this is no way to negotiate with a guy like Donald Trump. He wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. I suggest the Premier read it.
The Alberta government announced Wednesday that if Budget 2025 is to pass, they will provide $8.5 million towards the Rural Utilities Program, which would help rural communities access critical services such as gas, electricity, and water. The announcement was made by Minister of Affordability and Utilities Nathan Newdorf at the Heritage Acres Farm Museum just outside of Pincher Creek.
The grants are distributed by our partners at the Alberta Federation of Rural Electrification Associations, an organization that dates all the way back to 1950. This funding means more families in rural and remote areas can keep their lights on and their homes warm. It means more small businesses can set up shop and contribute to local economies. And it means Alberta's agricultural industry can keep putting food on tables here at home and all around the world. There is additional funding in a number of different streams to help our First Nations and make sure that they attain both economic security and energy security. They often go hand in hand. We are working to, it's part of my mandate letter, to make sure that we provide natural gas to those communities so they can further those goals and initiatives.
The Rural Electric Program and Rural Gas Program were each founded in 2013 and 2001 respectively. The Rural Water Program was more recently founded in 2024. Hundreds of workers at the meat processing plant in Brooks, Alberta may soon find their commute to work shortened. The province announced a $1.8 million investment in the enhancement of an agri-food corridor in Newell Country. Brooks is home to JBS Foods, a meat processing plant which ships millions of kilograms of beef to restaurants throughout Western Canada. But according to the Premier, the limited highway corridor creates a bottleneck for both the shipments and the workers getting in and out of the plant at shift times.
The drive from the JBS plant to downtown Brooks is less than 8 kilometers, and it should take 10 minutes. Now, 10 minutes is a dream commute by just about anyone's definition. Unfortunately, for plant workers living in Brooks, 10 minutes from JBS to home remains exactly that, a dream. The reality is that the intersection of Range Road 150 and the Trans-Canada Highway creates a huge bottleneck. Drivers are challenged with safely turning onto a provincial highway with traffic coming at them at highway speed in both directions. And anyone who's made a hard left turn onto a highway knows you need a long, clear gap in oncoming traffic. Multiply that by the string of vehicles leaving the plant at shift change, and it's easy to see how this road can get backed up in a hurry. And I'm happy to announce that we are providing funding for a road that will connect the JBS food plant to Highway 873. This will enable plant workers to bypass the congested intersection and use a quicker, safer secondary route, cutting up to 45 minutes off the time it takes workers at the plant to get to and from work each way.
The $1.8 million investment includes a $1.2 million grant from the Strategic Transportation Infrastructures Program and $600,000 from the province. A worldwide crackdown on child pornography resulted in the arrest of an Edmonton man last month. Europol, German police, and the National Child Exploitation Crime Center told local authorities an Edmonton man had allegedly accessed KidFlix, an online service that shares child pornography. Edmonton police arrested a 36-year-old man at a home in southeast Edmonton and seized his electronic devices. The man was released from custody but is to appear in court on April the 14th. Now, Alberta is looking more attractive to federal parties. This is because of a redistribution of seats in the House of Commons. To talk more about this is our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson, who sat down with BCN's Jeanette Rocher.
There was a redistricting boundary changes that happened, actually, and I think Alberta got 3 more seats. So, and that's just, our population grows, and every 10 years, a commission looks at the electoral boundaries and moves them around and yada, yada, yada. Matters a little bit in terms of the Liberals' electoral fortunes in Edmonton and Calgary. Actually, largely will not affect the rest of the province. But the polling right now is really interesting because of course Alberta is going to send a majority of Conservative MPs to Ottawa. I mean I don't think that trend has ever changed. I mean, I think you need to go back to about 1949 to find a time that we've sent more than 4. The polling is suggesting that the Liberals might make some gains this time around, maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 seats, actually. If it was 5, that would be a big deal. As I say, it'd be like 75 years since we'd sent that many. But it is going to be interesting to see when Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre come. Of course, both of them Alberta boys. Mark Carney grew up in Edmonton. Pierre Poilievre grew up in Calgary. But neither of them need to focus on Alberta. This is the great Alberta tragedy. No one needs to focus on us to win a federal election. They're fighting over seats in sort of the Lower Mainland and the Greater Toronto area and stuff like that. The vote's pretty much fixed in Alberta for a majority of Conservatives. So it will be interesting to see what they say when they come here.
Okay, for sure. Photo radar also came to an end actually on April 1st. So ending everywhere except playground zones, school zones, construction zones. So Tyler, how much could this pull from municipal and provincial budgets?
A fair bit, actually. About $170 million is sort of the 2022-2023 figure for that. Now, the photo radar has been sort of steadily being pulled back over the last couple of years, even in advance of this. So I would expect the numbers currently are a little bit lower than that. But, not an inconsequential amount of money, especially in cities where photo radar sort of helps fund policing budgets and things like that. And this is a really interesting one because it actually put the United Conservatives in opposition to police forces across the province, which believe in photo radar as traffic safety measures, and obviously reduces the burden on them of having to police the roads. But of course, people who like to drive fast are going to like it, and I've certainly got some friends who have got kids and are constantly running late for everything, and they're pretty happy about it, and their spouses are happy about it too, that they're not going to be getting tickets in the mail. So, bit of a fiscal challenge for the government. A political challenge. I mean, I don't think so, unless we see absolute chaos on the roads in the next year. Then it might become a bit of a political issue. But the interesting thing is, as you mentioned, it is sticking around in these three spots: playground zones, school zones, and construction zones. And municipalities can actually apply to have photo radar at sort of high danger areas. There's a whole lot of red tape they'll need to go through to do that, but there still could be some photo radar. And for anyone out there who's thinking of, driving really aggressively, red light cameras are still in effect. They have not got rid of red light cameras. It's just photo radar and speed on green. So a little public service announcement for everyone on that one.
Up next, stories from around southern Alberta. Don't go away. Last weekend, we brought you the story of Lethbridge Conservative Rachel Thomas, who announced her re-election bid for the Lethbridge riding. But she may have her work cut out for her, as a former Lethbridge mayor is looking to make change by running with the Liberals. BCN's Landon Hickok has more.
In what is expected to be a tight federal election campaign this year, a former mayor is looking to make ground in a typically conservative riding in the midst of a national Liberal resurgence. Chris Spearman announced he is running for a spot as a member of parliament under the Lethbridge riding.
I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to run. I think I'd like to be a positive politician. I don't want to see the type of politics where people only represent and only speak to the people that voted to them. We need to expand that, and we need to make sure that elected politicians speak for the whole constituency and represent that constituency when they go to Ottawa.
It is expected to be a tight race between the federal Liberals, led by recently appointed Prime Minister Mark Carney, and the Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre. Spearman, who served 2 terms as mayor of Lethbridge from 2013 to 2021, commended Mark Carney for his economic experience and vision.
I think we need a leader of a political party and a prime minister who fully understands the economy, who has had the experience in dealing with international finances. I think that we get that with Mark Carney. I think he can demonstrate his past experience both in Canada and internationally in dealing with those types of issues.
Spearman says that he has a proven track record that should help to convince voters.
I have a proven record of elected public service. I think that counts for a lot. I hope that people take that into account and recognize that I tried to build up investment in this city and also make the city more affordable by controlling tax increases and the impact that the city had on them. We need to make sure that we're governing in a coordinated way, in a way that meets the challenges that Canadians have identified.
The federal election will officially be held on Monday, April the 28th. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
In sports, the WHL's Lethbridge Hurricanes got off to a hot start in their first round matchups against the Brandon Wheat Kings. The Hurricanes played host to Brandon at the visitlethbridge.com arena for Game 1 and 2 over the past weekend. BCN's Landon Hickok has more.
Large crowds of fans showed up to last Friday and Saturday's back-to-back matchups as the Lethbridge Hurricanes begin the 2025 postseason. The Hurricanes finished fourth in the Eastern Conference in the regular season with a 41-21-3-3 record, good enough for home ice advantage in round one of the playoffs. The Canes entered the postseason with championship ambitions, acquiring stars Braden Yeager, Jackson Unger, and Votek Port from the Moose Jaw Warriors in separate trades throughout the season. Game 1 was held on Friday, which saw the Canes take control early with goals from Leo Brayard and Votek Port. After the Canes took a 2-1 lead into the second period, the Canes scored 2 goals in 13 seconds to take a 4-1 lead. Despite pushback later in the second period by the weak Canes, the Hurricanes hung on to secure a 6-3 win.
Yeah, it was a great start. That's how we wanted to play. Came out hard, heavy, stuck to our structure, and long way to go still for sure. But it's a good start to the playoffs.
Yeah, a lot of emotion in the building early, and then it settled in, and I thought we were better once it settled down a little bit, but no, we were good. We got off to a nice lead, and then we got a little loose, and then put it away in the third. So overall, we're going to learn from it and move on.
Game 2 on Saturday started scoreless through the first period, but the game opened up with Brandon securing their first lead of the series at a 2-1 lead.
Yeah, it was unreal. It was a pretty cool atmosphere. I've been in it a couple of years, and that was by far the coolest and loudest I've seen it. It gives us so much energy, and you got goosebumps in the room on the bench, so it's pretty cool.
The building's always jumping. Friday night, lots of good plays, lots of good hockey, so an opportunity for them to be passionate, and they always are. We got great fans.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
There's rarely ever a shortage of tricky scams where fraudsters can easily steal your money or identity. After the break, I sit down with the Better Business Bureau to hear of the latest schemes. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.